Don't Fear the Vegan is Salem's television resource for vegan lifestyle information and is intended for the vegan curious and the vegan connoisseur alike. The following telecast contains scenes of extreme deliciousness that may be inappropriate for hungry viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hi, welcome to this episode of Don't Fear the Vegan. Today we have special guests, the VeganMos, Michael and Ethan, all the way from Brooklyn, New York. Thanks for coming.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so glad we were able to be out here with you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So they're in town for a wedding, and so they only have a limited time. So we're going to kind of rush through the prep tonight, and then we'll get to an interview so you can learn more about them. You ready to go?
We are, and this is actually one of our favorite brunch type recipes.
Awesome.
Because we came up with it when we had a garden out in New Jersey that, like everyone in suburban New York, you have your garden, you have zucchinis, tomatoes, squash, basil. Everybody's growing that, so you wind up with so much that you can't just keep giving it away to people. So like, okay, what do? We can't keep making zucchini bread. We have gallons of sauce in the fridge, so we came up with a tomato zucchini frittata to use up a lot of the bounty from our garden.
Awesome.
And this was just a great brunch thing, and we love it because you can make it ahead of time.
Okay, cool.
Like the night before, keep it in the fridge, and then just bake it right before you need it.
Oh, that's awesome. So you don't have to get up early to make it.
Exactly.
Cool. I'm excited. I've never liked eggs, so I've never had a frittata, so I have no idea what we're getting into.
Fantastic. Okay, so basically it's a crustless quiche.
That's what I was told this morning.
Okay, so we are going to start out with, grab a little bowl here. So it's going to be a little bit of cornstarch or arrowroot into your bowl.
Just as a thickener.
Yeah.
And a binder.
Yes. Without this, it will not hold together. You learn that one the hard way.
Yeah, for sure. And just so you know, if you're new to the show, we will have the recipe on our blog, Don't Fear the Vegan, and it's also on VeganMos blog.
So you just want to stir this up to dissolve everything. And I always like doing this early because I tend to forget this part of it sometimes. And it's like everything's ready to go, and it's like, oh, why isn't it holding together? Right, because I forgot this. So I always do it first, and I just set it aside so it's ready when we need it. So once we have all that mixed up, set aside, it's time to move on to the squash and the zucchini. You can use 2 zucchini, 2 squash, whatever your preferences are. I like to use 1 of each just for the color. Pretty easy here. You're just going to slice off the stem end, and then it's using the large holes on a box grater. Just give it a quick shredding all the way down. Another great thing with this recipe is the base of it, before you add your vegetable matter, is great. You can alter it to whatever you want to do. If you want to do...
We did a broccoli and cheddar and bacon.
Oh,
yeah.
That would be good. What kind of bacon did you use?
We used, I think we made our own, it was our own TVP, right?
Right.
But you can use the coconut bacon that's available.
Okay, cool.
Or we did one that we made, I think it was from, was it Lindsay's book?
Yeah.
She has a great TVP in, I'm totally blanking.
Happy Herbivore.
Happy Herbivore, yeah.
So what's TVP?
Sorry, it's texturized vegetable protein, or sometimes it's called TSP, which is texturized soy protein.
Okay.
Depends on what you want, but it basically is a good lattice of crunchiness, and it absorbs any flavor that you want to put into it. It's really good for making homemade bacon.
Nice.
Or if you don't want to do that, you can just cook up some bacon-flavored tempeh, crumble that up, and it works beautifully.
It does. Get really creative with it, because this is just a good base for making any kind of frittata.
So you can basically put anything you'd put in an omelet, right?
Exactly.
Cool.
So now we've got all this goodness.
Does that go in here?
Not yet. This is actually going to go, and grab your colander.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's going to go into a colander because there's a lot, people don't realize how much water there actually is in squashes and zucchini.
Unless you're watering your plants.
Yes.
You realize how much water actually goes into it.
I'm just going to put them in here. Clean up as much of this as we can.
Good.
And then, just, since my hand's a little yucky, you can just give it a good sprinkle of salt.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you wanted, the salt just helps draw out a lot of the moisture.
Oh, okay.
Because once the salt cooks, you don't want all the water in your frittata, because then it's just soggy and doesn't really hold up well.
Right.
So we're just going to let this sit out over here in your sink so it can drain. So that's all good. So now we're going to move on to the food processor portion. Food processor is your friend. Got our block of firm tofu. that everyone knows, open up the block, give it a good rinse off because it's been soaking in tofu juice. I don't know what else you call it.
I love tofu juice.
Now we want the cornstarch or arrowroot. Just give it one more quick stir just to make sure that nothing is settled. Right into the bowl. And then we are going to add nutritional yeast, which this is like one of our favorite things. Just it adds such a good cheesiness to food. And also your B vitamins, so win-win. And the one thing that you'll see in a lot of recipes doing like a tofu egg kind of thing is turmeric.
Right.
It adds a nice subtle flavor, but it's really for the color.
It's also really good for you.
It is really, really good for you.
Immune booster.
So that's just all gonna go in. And then you just want to give it a couple good pulses just to get it all really nice and smooth. And then, oh, no problem. And one trick I've learned from it is when you have to pour out of a food processor, if you put your finger at the bottom, it'll actually hold the blade in.
That's smart.
So that we can actually
So you don't have to fish
turn
that
it.
off.
Exactly.
It's just what I usually do.
Fishing out the blade,
Yeah,
and you're sitting there hoping not to
every
cut
time.
yourself.
See, you learn something new every day.
It's true.
So when I had left my job of practicing law, I used to just sit and watch the Food Network, and I learned a lot of really good food tips.
Yeah.
That was one of them. Okay.
All right.
So that's all well and good. So I just added a little bit of salt and pepper to this. We're gonna keep going with salt and pepper, and you just do this to taste, however much you like. Awesome. I just want to give that all a good stir up. And now this is gonna get set aside while we work on the rest of the filling. We have one nice size onion that we need to then just dice up.
Okay.
The recipe calls for a Vidalia. We are using a Walla Walla from Washington. But you could use any onion you said.
Yeah, any
except
onion.
For like for a sharp red
Right,
one.
you want just a sweeter onion is all we go for. And I always say Vidalia when I want a sweet onion, just because by us that was so readily available.
Right.
But yeah, Walla Wallas are great. If you can't, then just like a plain yellow or white onion.
Oh, thank you.
Also really good, as long as it's not a sharp purple red onion. Then we're just gonna dice that puppy up.
Yeah. I do it my old way. And I don't do that thing with my fingers. I freak people out when I cut with this, but I know my way around a knife.
And this is such a big onion, that's actually plenty.
Okay. I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
I also love. Awesome.
All right.
Okay,
We
that's
good?
awesome. So now we are going to swap places.
Sounds good. Let's do
It's
that.
time to do a little cooking. So we've got your big skillet. I wish we could have a skillet this size.
Yeah,
And-
that's way too much kitchen real estate.
exactly. So just a little bit of oil. And that's the thing. So many people are afraid to cook with oil,
Yeah.
but you know what? It adds a lot of flavor, and a little goes a long way. You don't need to use a lot, just a little bit to get some flavor going.
Yep.
And so we need to get this
What
turned to like a
temperature?
medium high. As soon as it comes to temperature, we're going to start sauteing up the onion. Thank you, sir. The onions just go right in.
Yeah.
We're just going to cover, now that's sauteing a little bit, we're just going to cover that up
Perfect.
and just let it go for a few minutes.
I like it.
Can you chop up the tomato?
I not only can, I will.
Thank you. And the nice thing is, this is not like a rushed thing, so this is kind of one of those that if you have friends over and you want to make it,
Right.
pour a glass of wine while you're having, because it's brunch, maybe a
Yeah.
mimosa.
I like it. I like anything that you can make the night before too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's actually
I'm not a morning person.
Especially if it's like a Sunday morning brunch and you're having friends over.
Right.
The very last thing that you want to do is wake up early and start cooking. So if this is ready to go from the night before, you're all set.
That's all it was all for me. You can see that this has now just started to steam really nicely.
I've never tried the lid on trick. I have to try that too.
It's great when you really just want to soften them up as opposed to getting a really caramelization on it. So I'm gonna reach back here grab our friends that have been soaking. Just gonna put it over this bowl that we had used before. Just press out.
Oh, there you
There you go.
There it goes.
So you can see how much liquid is actually in these vegetables. That we're gonna cook them in the skillet shortly, but the more water you can get out now, the faster it goes.
Oh, that's crazy. Wow. I gotta show that. It's crazy.
This is and you see once you've squeezed out the water, it's about half the volume that it was.
Wow.
That's just how much liquid there is in all of this. So now we're gonna, a little steam action. It's always nice to get a facial when you're cooking. So this is gonna just go right in. Those. I love that sound.
Yeah.
It's like it's goodness.
Too.
It smells incredible. I love how it just
Yeah.
all...
Yeah, once again, we need our smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision.
Smell-o-vision. Okay. So we're just gonna let this cook down. Just try to get more of the water and liquids just evaporated out of it. Drop in the tomatoes.
Yeah, sorry, we use our hands.
So do we.
I just love the colors of this too.
Yeah, it's really pretty.
And then once this starts going a little bit, you just want to crank up the heat just a little bit just to help it, because we're trying to just cook out the moisture. And then this is one of those little secret ingredients that I learned actually from Veg. And one of their tricks is to use sherry vinegar,
Okay.
because it adds just this umami, sweet richness to food. So I always like to add just a little bit. And if you don't have sherry vinegar, you can use red wine vinegar. And it adds a really interesting flavor to everything.
Smells really good too.
Yeah, it does. I smelled that earlier.
Then we are just gonna let this cook for another few minutes just to evaporate out some of the liquid. We can just crank that heat a little more. I forgot the last seasoning, which I sometimes do this. Ethan will tell you.
It's true. Or sometimes, well, you can add the seasoning.
So this is just some dried basil.
Okay.
Sometimes we actually don't.
Okay, so this is looking pretty good. And now with the basil and the vinegar.
That smells so good.
Okay, so that's, I think, good. And you can see all the liquid has pretty much evaporated out of it. There's like,
Oh, yeah.
so we're gonna bring back our tofu, which we had already prepared. And now all this goodness is gonna go right in here. I love how pretty this is. Just like that. And you wanna give that a good stir on. And you're just gonna fold all of that together.
Okay. Super simple.
Very simple. You can see the tofu, which had looked really thick, because there's moisture in this, starts to loosen up a little bit. And now comes the easiest part of the whole thing. Pam, everyone's friend. And you give a light coating in your pan, because you don't want to stick. Now all of this goodness goes right into here. And this is one that we've made for non-vegans. And it's like, are you sure that what do you mean that this is vegan? How can this be vegan?
They constantly
Right.
think that it's really egg and cream based.
And so that's it.
Oh, cool.
And then all this goodness just goes right into the oven
Okay, so we have it preheated
to 375.
to 375.
And it's going to cook for about 30 minutes.
Cool.
And
Okay, so
Like
we're
orange
back. The frittatas in the oven baking. We have about 30 minutes. I figured it'd be a great time to ask them some questions. Okay, so if I didn't tell you already, they're from VeganMos.com. Really curious about the name.
Yeah, we were sort of wondering about what to call it, and we wanted to, in addition to doing recipes and all the stuff that we do, we wanted to explore the intersection of animal rights and gay rights, LGBT rights, which we do in a couple of the thought pieces on our blog. And we were sort of wondering, and obviously our friends Dan and Mike have the gay vegans. They stole it.
We're coming for you.
They had that way before we did, and we weren't going to be the vegan gays because we didn't like that. Just sounded a little bit weird, and so we sort of resurrected an old term from like the 90s, which is MOS, which is a contraction for homos.
We were right.
You'd be amazed how many people have no idea what this is.
Oh, we got it. We were talking
did.
about it before, and I'm like, okay. I almost said I was going to ask you, is it for that?
It is for homos.
If it isn't, it might be inappropriate.
It's
totally appropriate.
It's totally appropriate. It's the kind of thing where people would be like, Tom Cruise, is he a Mo? Or something like that. And it's like, yeah, is he a Mo? Is she a Mo? And it was there was a very limited period of time, which definitely dates us now. Yeah. So you probably know how old we are if you've heard this contraction before.
If you watched Will and Grace, that's kind of where
it was a Mo. It's a Mo. In fact, I think Will actually said it on the show about being a Mo.
I never saw that show. That's why I didn't know.
And it's definitely about that. And it's really fun how many people say, the VeganMos. And I go, no, that has 2 S's. Moss is vegan, always.
Yeah.
And we were also playing with at the beginning. It could be like men of substance, men of style.
Men opposed to speciesism.
Yeah, I like it though, because it makes people ask.
Exactly.
As it should, right?
Exactly.
Cool. First up, how long have you guys been vegan?
I've been vegan, this Thanksgiving will be 6 years.
Oh wow, okay, cool.
And September for me will be 4.
4, okay.
So we were a mixed marriage for 2 years.
Were you vegetarian before? Or?
So I was vegetarian. I had been vegetarian a couple times in my life and lapsed back. Interestingly enough, on our second date, you pulled me back to the dark side.
I did.
And we had a date at a burger joint, and I got so sick after being vegetarian and having not had meat. I was like, had to end the date immediately and run home and be ill.
Also, we've noticed on your blog that you travel a lot.
We do.
You do.
We're here traveling right now.
So out of your travels, where was it the hardest for you to eat as a vegan?
That's a good question.
I actually have 2 answers for that one.
Go for it.
The first one is when Ethan was vegan and I wasn't. Actually, you were vegetarian. You hadn't gone vegan yet. We went to Paris.
I was going to say Paris too.
And this was...
many years ago. 5, 6 years ago.
So, and we have friends who have been there since who have said it's so much easier now than it was back then. But back then it was really...
A lot of the restaurants that have opened up there now, which have actually become very famous in sort of the vegan travel scene because there's such good vegan eating in Paris now. Because so much has changed, right? Everywhere in the past just even 5 years. But that was rough. I was actually going to say though, when we were in Russia, that was rough on a whole other level.
That was just
We were
hard.
in St. Petersburg, and I had found this place on Happy Cow, and I was really excited to go in, and they had a potato and a beet, and that was it. And I'm like, wow, we are getting back to my Russian and Hungarian roots here. And I just like ran back to the cruise ship and said, get me a salad.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be hard. So on your blog, theveganmos.com, I saw that you guys went on a trip to Israel.
We did.
And you did a little trip through the market.
That video is becoming a little
That
famous
video
now.
kind of took on its own personality.
Particularly with that wonderful person behind me who was shouting.
So what is the most interesting thing you found in the market? That's like my favorite thing to do in different areas. Is go to just produce sections to see what they have.
The most interesting thing.
First of all, the produce there was
it's all local.
not to be believed.
It's all local, and it's grown in pretty much a desert.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
And it's even, in the States, you go to a local farmer's market. Mm-hmm. When they say local, most people don't know local can be, what is it, like 300 miles or something?
Yeah, from here it could be Washington.
So how local is that? It's like, when I'm running to the local store, I'm not driving 300 miles to go shopping. But in Israel, when they mean local, it's local.
Yeah.
So all the produce, everywhere you go, it just tastes so amazing.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, that's...
I would definitely say that for me, there's a treat that they sell there, and it's in the video called halava, which is basically a sesame paste. And they import organic sesame seeds from Ethiopia to do this. Okay. And they're absolutely beautiful. And of course, that's how tahini is made as a paste. Right. But what I think was the most interesting thing to me is I knew that it was ground, and I knew there had to be some sort of machinery. But they had this, and you can see it in the video, it's this huge stone that sits on top of another huge stone, the size of this table, and it's a few tons, and they rotate on a motor. And the sesame seeds get sort of forced between them, and they get ground, and then the oils just sort of ooze out on the side of the stone, and they collect it. And it's seeing how they actually do this, it's the old way of doing it. It's amazing. We bought, how much did
It's
we
like
buy? We bought a tub of tahini on
yeah.
the way home. It was what vegans do in Israel, I guess. And we brought this thing home, and we're using it, and we're still using it months later, and it's just
so good. But
it's
then
really amazing.
Then they make it into the halva that Ethan was talking about, which is, it's a really dry, I don't like candy.
It's more like a caked paste.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of like more of like a marzipan.
Very similar.
Like
very similar.
Yeah.
Yes, but not as wet as a marzipan.
Yeah.
There's a real dryness to
That's
it.
why I don't like marzipan, because it's got that wetness to it. But how do you even say it right? Halva?
Halva.
And I mean, they make it in these cakes that are about this big around by about this high, all different flavors.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And we wound up, and the great thing is, like Ethan points out in the video, they let you try anything you want.
Yeah, so you can try the different flavorings. You want pistachio, you want the Belgian chocolate. I immediately asked him the Belgian chocolate. He's like, it's vegan. Because vegan is really taking off in Israel, probably more than any other country. Absolutely. And it's a really interesting phenomenon that the country is just really turning vegetarian and vegan right now. There's a huge, huge movement, both in food activism there as well as animal rights. Right. It's really inspiring.
Part of our trip when we were in Israel, we were in Tel Aviv for Gay Pride.
Oh, okay, cool.
Which was, it's actually like the biggest gay pride in Europe.
Although technically the Middle East, it's the only one in the Middle East. But
it's the only one in the Middle East. But so many people from Europe come down. I think it was, what, 500,000 people?
Yeah. It was
flocked to the city. And
well, actually, no. It was 250,000 people came to the city for Pride, but the city of Tel Aviv actually sponsors its own Pride, and they budget $500,000 a year to put on the festival, not just because it's tourism, because it's really important to them to have an inclusive sort of nature around Pride issues. This year the theme was Trans Pride, and they were really highlighting issues of the transgendered community in Israel, which was fascinating to learn about. And one of the things that they do is they make it completely accessible to the public. So unlike what happens in New York, where we have, sure, a free parade, but then all the different parties and festivals afterwards, you have to pay a pretty hefty sum to get into the festivals. It's completely free and open to the public. It's on the beach.
Awesome.
It's open on the beach. Everyone's there dancing.
You're dancing till sunset.
Eating, enjoying, and
so they really want everyone
and
to
amongst all, they do. They want it to be very
awesome.
inclusive. And everyone who's there, among the vendors, we walked right in, and there was a whole "Go Vegan" thing in Hebrew. Here we are, and you know, I think it's interesting because in Israel there is this movement, like we just said, about everyone wanting to sort of become more involved in vegetarianism, veganism, animal rights, and it definitely seems like it's coming from the younger generation.
It's a ground up.
It's a ground up kind of situation. This younger generation, I say younger because we are now officially middle-aged, they are really taking this seriously. They're anti-war, they're pro-peace with the Palestinians. It is a really optimistic change to see happening within Israeli culture.
Yeah, it's like they're understanding the compassion and that, you know what, we're all in this together, so...
They actually learn from their history lessons.
They do tremendously. And actually one of the great things was one night in Tel Aviv, our friend Jenny Brown from the Woodstock Farm Animal Sanctuary, now Woodstock Farm Sanctuary, she introduced us through email to these two women who are starting Israel's very first farmed animal sanctuary.
Oh. That's awesome. So it's ready, and we're going to take it out of the oven now. It smells delicious in here. But you wouldn't know that because we don't have smell-o-vision.
Yet.
Yep.
It's beautiful. I love the colors. Thanks.
No problem.
Do you usually let it cool before you eat?
You usually want to let it cool just a minute or two just to make sure everything's kind of firmed up again.
And you don't burn yourself.
And you don't burn.
That's a good idea.
Your viewership is important to us. Please continue to hold, and the show will return shortly.
I myself, yes. Love it.
Awesome. Okay, we can give it a go.
Can we?
Yeah, why not?
So as you can see, it has a very similar look to scrambled eggs. You can disguise it. And like they said, you can fool people and they won't even know.
People will not know that this is not egg-based.
It's so good.
Thank you.
I love the fact that you didn't put much basil in it, but the flavor like really pops, but not overpowering.
Yeah, that's the nice thing when you're using like the dried herbs. Interesting my little factoid then. When you're using fresh herbs versus dried, you use 1/3 of the amount of dried as you would fresh, because the flavor is so much more concentrated.
That's good to know. I always have to look it up every time.
No.
So 1/3. It's easy to remember. Thanks for coming. Check out how to make frittata. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Ethan and Michael from VeganMos.com. Make sure to check out their blog. And you'll be able to find the recipe on their blog or on our blog, don'tfearthevegan.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Yeah.